So sometimes an on-screen demise is brutal, not because it's sudden and unexpected, but for precisely the opposite reason. Yes, some deaths are utterly inevitable, whether it's because an actor wants to retire an aging character, the character themselves have run their course, the story requires a heroic sacrifice, or in some cases they're based on real-life figures whose untimely deaths are a matter of common knowledge. Nonetheless, this can cause an intense strain of dramatic irony, as the audience is left burdened with some foresight they wish they didn't have. And we can't fool ourselves into thinking things will work out alright in the end, and everyone will ride off merrily into the metaphorical sunset. So with all that in mind, I am Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 movie deaths you knew were coming that still broke you. Number 10, Wolverine Logan. We all knew it was coming. Once the words Old Man Logan first escaped Hugh Jackman's lips, the writing was on the wall for the Australian star's most beloved screen role. Jackman's iteration of the gruff X-Men anti-hero predated the entire MCU, with his first appearance in the iconic supersuit hitting cinemas way back in 2000. That's nearly 25 years ago, man. But 17 long years after that debut, it was time to say goodbye for a bit to this universally adored character. And who better to do the elegiac job than Walk the Line helmet James Mangold? And yet, maybe it's because the flick toned down the more pointlessly bleak elements of its source material. Maybe it's because the hard R rating let the hero use his claws more than ever before. And despite his advancing age, this gory skill made him seem all but invincible. Whatever the cause, by the end of the film, we were left wishing the irritable anti-hero might somehow make it out alive, despite knowing a necessary heroic sacrifice was on its way, making the inevitable ending even more powerful despite its predictability. Now here's hoping his return in Deadpool and Wolverine does not undermine that heartbreaking end. Number 9, Carlito Brigante, Carlito's Way. Maybe the compliment you can give a film that telegraphs the death of a character at the very beginning is that at some point along the way you got so wrapped up in their story that you ended up believing they were actually going to survive. This is the trick Brian De Palma masterfully pulled off with his underrated crime classic Carlito's Way. Released in 1993 and starring Al Pacino as the eponymous former crook looking to go straight after completing his sentence, De Palma's film is gripping and typically stylish, boasting one of the director's greatest technical accomplishments with a superb one-er as Carlito escapes his mob pursuers at Grand Central. Well, nearly escapes. The very first frames of Carlito's Way show Carlito being gunned down in front of a train carriage, before being taken away by medical staff as he slowly fades away. A monologue then follows in which Carlito says, "Somebody's pulling me close to the ground. I can sense, but I can't see." The last shot of Carlito here, caked in darkness, is him looking into the light of an advertising hoarding. All signs point towards Carlito's death. And yet the ineffable charms of Pacino and the locomotive pace of the picture will us to think he'll make it out. That cannot happen, of course, with Carlito getting taken out by John Leguizamo's Benny Blanco as he and his love Gail are about to board their train to freedom. We then return to the opening frames of the film, as the colour once again drains from the lens, and Carlito embraces the light of a new life he'll never get to experience. Number 8, Leonidas 300. The clue is in the title for this one. With King Leonidas' army of only a mere 300 Spartans facing down over 300,000 Persian enemies, it was pretty clear how all 300 of said Spartans would end up by the close of the Battle of Thermopylae. But Leonidas himself seems like he might somehow actually, survive. I mean, just look at the guy. Maybe it was Zack Snyder's judicious application of slow-mo during the film's many battle sequences, or Gerard Butler's angsty teeth-gnashing hamminess, or the overblown machismo of Frank Miller's source material. Whatever the cause, the film manages a neat trick of both informing you immediately that these men are doomed, and nonetheless leading you to think that Butler's Leonidas might just somehow make it out alive despite this. As corny and over the top as a lot of the film definitely is, it's hard to deny that this sense of invincibility with which the titular army and their heroic leader are imbued makes it tough not to root for them to defy the odds. And their eventual sacrifice manages to make the leap from inevitable to tragic as a result. Now I've got a quick question for you. What is your favourite Zack Snyder movie of all time? Is it 300 or something else? You let me know in the comment section down below. Number 7, Ken in Bruges. When Martin McDonagh sits down to write a comedy, you can be fairly certain that a lot of blood will be spilled. None of it will be in a predictable or conventional manner, And at least one of our heroes is not destined to emerge alive. It's just how he does things. His feature debut, 2008 spiky black comedy In Bruges, is no exception to this rule, introducing us to a pair of Irish hitmen and slowly revealing their backstory as their unstable mob boss employer tries to track the pair down. Yes, Colin Farrell's roguish Ray seems like he may be marked for death from the beginning, but it's reliable comic relief / underrated character actor Brendan Gleeson's aging Ken who we properly know won't make it out of this alive. And yet, the warm banter between him and Farrell leaves us unable to stop ourselves from imagining a more optimistic end to their holiday in the titular burg, despite knowing exactly where proceedings are heading from the first haunting strains of On Raglan Road. Number 6. Fantine Les Miserables. Anyone even slightly familiar with the premise of Les Miserables would have known the winding story of Tom Hooper's 2012 adaptation was not heading anywhere overly optimistic. Hell, the clue is right there in the title with this one again. The Miserables. That said, even though the death of angelic, innocent, corrupted former factory girl turned destitute prostitute Fantine is utterly inevitable and blatantly signposted by her barnstorming solo number I Dreamed a Dream, it still brings a tear, man. None of this detracts from the sting of the scene when it finally happens. Surrounded by bleak poverty, Fantine's desperate ode to brighter days is a heartbreaking scene, even without the accompaniment of Hooper's appropriately grimy and queasy color palette. With it, the scene is a devastating indictment of an uncaring society, which would touch even the most cold-hearted viewer, despite its easy-to-guess denouement. Thanks for checking out this video today, my friend, and if you're enjoying what you're watching, then hit that subscribe button down below for more What Culture in your day. Number 5. William Wallace, Braveheart. The story of rebel hero William Wallace is common knowledge in many parts, and when Mel Gibson directed and starred in a big-budget biopic of the warrior in 1995, it didn't take a genius to guess which scene the film would conclude with. The titular hero wasn't exactly likely to ride off into the sunset with his bonny bride, given the fate of his real-life inspiration, after all. That said, Gibson's career best turn in the role, dodgy accent aside, the soaring, triumphant score, a set of stellar supporting roles, and particularly the film's bruising, brutally realistic battle scenes, meant we were largely distracted from the inevitable ending until it came around. By then, his violent fate sealed. Braveheart's last gasp roar of freedom was enough to leave anyone devastated, despite technically knowing where the whole affair was headed before even arriving at the multiplex, or sitting on your couch, or whatever. Number 4. Michael Collins. Michael Collins. Another appearance for a real-life figure on this list. This one from the 1996 biopic directed by Butcher Boy auteur Neil Jordan. Anyone who boasted a passing familiarity with Irish history, which most viewers seeking out this flick likely had, right, would know that Liam Neeson's heroic firebrand of a reformer, the titular Michael Collins, met an early end via a sniper bullet during the Irish Civil War. Despite this, and Julia Roberts' atrocious Irish accent, the film manages to do an admirable job of making Collins' life carry more gravitas than a shaggy dog story leading to an inevitable execution. Instead, the moment is given the weight an icon like Collins deserves, as Neeson portrays his conflicted loyalties throughout the film, and the meditative pacing allows the audience to appreciate the implications of his actions throughout a military and political career defined by fearlessness in the face of tyranny. Number 3. Mike Enslin, 1408. This one is an unusual case, as many viewers who only caught this underrated 2007 chiller in cinemas will have no idea what I'm talking about in this entry. In fact, anyone who is only familiar with this spooky flick's source material, the Stephen King story of the same name, will be equally lost. You see, John Cusack's likable everyman Mike Enslin, a skeptical paranormal investigator, survives his brush with the haunted room 1408 in both King's original story and the film's executive mandated cinematic cut. But as anyone who has seen the director's cut can attest, the film makes it clear from the beginning that Mike's fate is sealed as soon as he steps into the Dolphin. It's underlined by countless small details, such as the lone cigarette he brings, used to set the room ablaze in a heroic self-sacrifice, and the bottle of brandy gifted to him by Samuel L. Jackson's stern hotel manager, which becomes a Molotov cocktail for the same purpose. So some very clear and well-established foreshadowing then. Now that doesn't make us any less delighted every time Mike somehow implausibly escapes in the cinema version though. Good for him. Number 2, Cheyenne, Once Upon a Time in the West. Once we're introduced to the central duo of Sergio Leone's deconstructive western Once Upon a Time in the West, it's clear that the remorseless, cool-eyed child killer Frank isn't gonna make it out of this celluloid adventure alive. And that Charles Bronson's taciturn anti-hero will no doubt be the man to save this small town, and its requisite damsel in distress from the nefarious villain. But this is Leone, and the Old West is once again acting as a metaphor for old Hollywood and its black and white view of morality. As such, once we meet Jason Robards' sardonic Cheyenne, the picture becomes clearer and his fate seems all but sealed from his first conversation with Claudia Cardinal's not-so-helpless heroine. What unfolds is a western which challenges the conventions of the genre, constantly wrong-footing the audience in all areas but one. Catching a stray bullet in the climactic firefight, the gentleman bandit Cheyenne dies smiling, a last breath for the Old West before the new world is born. We're not crying, you're crying. Number 1, Mufasa, The Lion King. Okay, so not every kid watching The Lion King is familiar with Shakespeare's Hamlet, are they? As some parents, for some inexplicable reason, insist on introducing their children to this cartoon classic, before showing them Kenneth Branagh's seminal unabridged adaptation of the Bard's best work from 1996. What are they thinking, eh? But the clue is once again in the title here, folks. Simba is our young hero, and even if it weren't for the intervention of Jeremy Irons' all-time great villain Scar, Mufasa would inevitably need to pass on into the clouds before the protagonist could assume the eponymous position. It's just the way these things work. Despite this, there are few screen deaths more crushing than Mufasa's ignoble end at the hooves of a herd of stampeding wildebeest. Get it? Crushing? No, it's still too soon. It's too soon. Simba's tearful desperation in the wake of his death really says it all. We may have all known it was coming, but damn, did they really have to go through with it? Man, I'm still not over it. I'm not. I'm gonna need a second. I'll be with you. Just click on the next video. I'll be back.